Night, the quiet and mysterious counterpart to our day, a vital element of our nature.
Plants, human beings, animals, all depend on a good day-night rhythm.
But lately, the night has been changing rapidly.
Clouds at night, they're not supposed to be yellow or orange, they should be black.
Scientists are only now discovering the effects light has on nature.
We should really be careful with artificial light at night. It's simply not natural.
We humans, we can just switch the light on and off. Animals and plants can't.
Follow the explorers and discover the dark side of bright nights. Nightlife in the big city. In many places on our planet, human beings have done away with natural darkness. The change was fast, maybe too fast for our body clocks.
For millions of years, organisms have adapted to the rhythms of day and night. We've only had artificial light for comparatively few decades, and its use is increasing exponentially.
Meanwhile, over 80% of human beings worldwide live with nighttime light pollution.
Light is spreading out into previously unlit regions, and many organisms simply haven't had the chance to adapt.
And the effect has been dramatic, not just for nature, but also for our own health. Are diseases and extinction of species the price of our hunger for light? Franz Hölker heads up the Light Pollution and Ecophysiology Research Group at the Leibniz Institute of Freshwater Ecology and Inland Fisheries in Berlin. His view of pulsating nightlife is rather different to most people's.
So if you look around here, it's not just the noise level, but also really the whole sensation that you get from the lights. It's anything but a natural environment. In our evolutionary history, the only light that was visible was the light of the stars and the moon. And if you look up here in Berlin, for example, you can barely see any starlight at all. You can still make out a couple of stars, but even on a clear night like this, you hardly notice them.
Do our nights really have to be that bright?
Much of the light being produced here is light that is emitted upwards and often not used. So it's wasted light and actually also a waste of energy.
Energy-saving LED lights are intended to reduce these effects. But particularly because they use so little energy, more and more light is being deployed. This alters the night for nature so quickly that many animal and plant species simply can't keep up. Their numbers and variety are rapidly dwindling. Research like that done by Franz Hölker and other international institutions shows that the impact on the biosphere is dramatic. So around the world, laws are being drafted that are designed to curb light pollution. Since 1988, the International Dark Sky Association has been campaigning to regain natural darkness. The Darß Peninsula in northern Germany plans to take part in this program. To earn the title Dark Sky Community or Star Park, the community has to prove how dark it is and what they're doing about it. One of the experts is astronomer Andreas Hähnel.
We're going to visit various spots where we'll take measurements of the sky's brightness to find out how dark it is here. We want to do it in several places to see how much light is emitted at these places and to see how strong its influence is.
Away from the villages, it is so dark that only special cameras can capture what little light there still is.
Okay, let's move over here a bit.
Andreas Haenel takes his measurements at new moon when the night is darkest. He uses 2 digital cameras with fisheye lenses and long exposure times.
It's rolling. Okay, lights off. Now we've got to make it totally dark because I'm going to do the observation, take measurements. Right. Okay, so we've got 4 minutes of exposure time, so please keep it dark now.
The cameras are pointing vertically upwards. They capture the entire night sky, as well as the light sources on the horizon all around them.
We'll see the image soon, the first picture.
The cameras take 360-degree photographs of the night sky. The bright horizon surrounds the black vault of the sky like a circle of light.
We can see all the places here, the sources of light, and we can see that they have a dome of light where the light radiates upwards. Above our heads here are light clouds, so at the moment it's quite strongly lit up.
The phenomenon is called sky glow, when moisture in the air and clouds reflects artificial light and scatters it over enormous areas. At the bright outer edge of the 360-degree image, the sky glow occurs almost everywhere on the horizon. Using the photos, Andreas Haenel measures the brightness digitally, obtaining images that enable him to assess the quality of the darkness. The significant factor is the sky brightness. For a community to qualify as a dark sky community, the levels must be above the 20 mark. Outside the built-up areas, Andreas Haenel has already recorded values like this, but in the villages, the darkness is still being disrupted by lights that are too bright.
And there is also the problem that especially here, there are many nocturnal animals. Nevertheless, it would be good if we had a spot where, for example, we can't see any artificial light source in the sky. They are brighter than the stars up there. And that should be the goal for a star park, that you don't see those bright sources of light.
A bird's-eye view shows clearly how, even in dark areas, village and street lighting cut through the night. A network of artificial light now covers almost the entire Earth, and it's growing by more than 2% a year. This increasing light pollution is not only a problem for nocturnal animals, but also for migrating birds, the global travelers of the animal world. Around 50 billion of them are on the move day and night every spring and autumn to reach their breeding or wintering grounds. They cross almost the entire planet on 8 main routes to do so. Along the East Atlantic migratory route, the nutrient-rich sand and mudflats of the Wadden Sea to the north of Europe play a decisive role. Millions of birds stop here in spring to roost, rest and feed before moving on and dispersing throughout Scandinavia and the Arctic region. In autumn, they also need this pit stop on their way back down south. Many migratory birds rest up on the mudflat islands to stock up their energy reserves. There's a glut of food for oyster catchers, bar-tailed godwits, little ringed plovers, dunlins, and many other species. In the Lower Saxony Wadden Sea National Park, they're all strictly protected. These wetlands accommodate up to 12 million birds in spring and autumn. Rangers observe and guard the annual visitors. Peter Zuidbeck heads up the National Park Administration and coordinates all protection measures in the roughly 3,500 square kilometre area.
Migratory birds on the Wadden Sea that come to us now in spring have a flight of 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers behind them. They fly for 3, 4, 5 days, many of them non-stop. It's almost impossible to imagine flying in the air and burning their fat, burning their aviation fuel. On this great migration route, before they set off for the breeding grounds, many into the Arctic, another 5,000 kilometers. In the middle, there is only one point, that is the Wadden Sea, which has so much food that they can manage this route at all, but also that they can breed successfully up there in the Arctic. In spring, the birds are only here for 3 to 4 weeks, some 5 weeks, depending on the conditions, depending on their need to replenish their energy reserves. In this short time, depending on their size and species, they will gain between 50 and 100% of their body weight.
It's also impressive how migratory birds find their destinations over enormous distances and how they can optimize their flight routes. They use the Earth's magnetic field as a compass, orientating themselves by the position of the sun during the day and the stars at night. This has worked since time immemorial, also along the East Atlantic bird migratory route. But in recent times, lights have been interfering with the birds' nocturnal navigation. Coastal towns, harbors, oil rigs and ships now illuminate this stretch of the route. The artificial light causes many birds to deviate from their ideal route. Some then die in the sea. In all cases, they lose too much precious energy through detours. Whether they're still able to reach their breeding grounds in the far north is questionable.
We can assume that an artificial light source is attractive and invites birds to fly towards it. This can lead to collisions. For example, birds used to collide with lighthouses, but now they collide with wind turbines or other light sources because they're attracted to them, and so they stray from their path. And in this respect, of course, light pollution at sea must be examined especially critically, and above all, stopped.
Artificial lights are especially dangerous during bad weather, as migratory birds flying beneath the clouds can no longer orientate using the moon and stars. Researchers can only estimate how many birds collide with these light traps at sea or drop from the skies through sheer exhaustion because they land in the water and disappear. Studies on land suggest that many millions also perish like this at sea.
There are many effects where we cannot even imagine how the current change in lighting will affect the ecology of individual species. We really need to broaden our research in this area so that we have a scientific decision-making basis for nature conservation, so that we can be convincing on the one hand, but also so that we can counteract the problem of light pollution as quickly as possible, or act to avert it as far in advance as possible.
It's not just flight behavior that is affected by light smog. Researchers also identified other behavioral changes in many animals. For example, in the nightjar, a bird that commutes between Africa and Europe. Ecologist Ruben Evans noticed that in Africa, in the naturally dark nights, the birds displayed different hunting behavior than in the illuminated bright nights of Western Europe. As part of his long-term studies, he sets traps near the Belgian Hoge Kempen National Park. He uses special nets that don't harm the birds.
We need to catch these birds because we try to invest individual behaviors in response to light conditions. In order to do this, we need to catch individuals in order to put tracking devices on them. And this way we can study how they fly, where they fly to, where they eat, how much they eat, where they incubate the eggs.
This loudspeaker broadcasts the call of a male nightjar. Ruben Evans uses it as a lure for competing males or interested females.
It's windy, huh? There he is.
Now they have to wait and see if any birds will enter the trap.
There he is. So there is a nightjar sitting there, yeah, right above the net. It's a male. These nightjars, they are so fascinating. Most people have never seen them. Most people have only heard them or seen like a dark shade somewhere flying. And being able to unravel their ecology, like the influence of light on their behavior, how they breed, how they forage, where they eat, what they eat, it's so fascinating. And it's a privilege to do it.
Ruben Evans has been researching the lives of nightjars in Africa and Europe for more than 12 years. He documents their behavior in different places so that he can compare and see what's changing.
This one is a nice male. I think that it's an adult from last year. And we also have two birds, young birds from last year. So it's a relatively good evening.
Ruben takes the carefully wrapped up birds to his field lab.
What is very important to know is that these nightjars, they are visual predators, and they need light in order to detect prey against a bright horizon or a light sky. So they need light to detect prey, but also to fly. Under natural circumstances, this would mean that as soon as there is no moon above the horizon or there is no more daylight, these birds, they cannot do anything. They have to sit still, they have to wait until there is light again.
The biologist attaches the transmitters to the birds' bodies with care so that they will interfere as little as possible with its natural movements. He also attaches an accelerometer, a device that tells him remotely when the birds are resting, flying, or pouncing suddenly on insects.
Under natural circumstances, moonless nights and cloudy nights are the most dark scenarios that you can imagine. But here in Western Europe, they are among the most light conditions that you can imagine. So these birds, they can be active whenever they want. Our data show that these birds in Mongolia and Africa, they don't fly when there is no moonlight. But here in Western European countries, when it's cloudy, for example, the nights are even more brighter or lighter than during full moon conditions. The big question is whether sky glow facilitates these nightjars. And that is also my hypothesis, that nightjars, when they are subjected to sky glow, are able to use this as some sort of artificial light source, an artificial moon, and that they are able to be active at moments when they shouldn't be active.
In contrast to the vast majority of living creatures that are harmed by light pollution, nightjars seem to benefit from it. But the question of whether artificial light is good or bad for nature is not just about individual species, but the entire ecosystem. The Havel, a river near Berlin, Germany, is a protected nature conservation area. In addition, since 2014, the region has also been declared a dark sky park, where darkness is actively maintained. But here, too, lanterns disrupt the natural nightlife, especially of insects. Ecologist Sophia Johannesson wants to find out how much of an impact this actually has. As part of the Street Lighting Investigation Project, she's investigating the effects of artificial light on the insect population, especially in the vicinity of natural bodies of water. Some of the insects buzzing around the light fall into her traps. Later, in her laboratory, Sophia Johannesson identifies the species.
The Havel is about 200 to 300 meters away from here, and we want to investigate whether aquatic insects are also attracted by these streetlights, and if so, how many and to what extent. Aquatic insects are very, very sensitive to brightness because, like other insects, they are naturally adapted to the natural day-night rhythm. And also, aquatic insects are the basis of the food chain for all the fish and other creatures that live on the Havel.
Many flying insects that are about at night have a close connection to aquatic ecosystems and usually begin their lives as larvae below the water's surface. A mosquito larva takes about 10 days to hatch. As soon as it unfolds its wings, it goes in search of a mate to reproduce. If it succeeds, it can lay its own eggs in the water after a few days, where the life cycle begins anew. But permanently bright nights severely disrupt its search for a mate.
The street lights act like a magnet or like an irresistible attraction, especially to flying insects. They think it's the moon, it's the stars. They're attracted and keep trying to realign themselves, flying disoriented around the bright globe up there, especially around the light source.
Where no lights illuminate the night, many insects, birds, and other animals orientate themselves to the celestial bodies when looking for food and breeding partners. But with just a few lamps that act as false moons, even in the protected West Havel Dark Sky Park, insects are in danger. What Sophia Johannesson is researching here is the so-called vacuum cleaner effect. That is, light sucks insects in from the surrounding area. In vain, the confused creatures try time and again to fly away, and in the end, they just land back at the lantern until they're finally exhausted and die. A closer look shows, however, that these lights don't seem to be bad for all species. For some, they're more of a brightly lit, all-you-can-eat buffet. It's mainly spiders that leave the dark undergrowth to spin their webs where there is light, and therefore lots of insects. Even if individual species seem to benefit from artificial light, research must find out what the long-term effects are. Because the more insects there are dying at lanterns and so unable to reproduce, the fewer individuals there will be in the next generation. So every night, the lanterns deprive the ecosystem of ever more creatures that are important for the environmental food chain. Over some 30 years, the numbers of flying insects in Germany have dwindled by over 75%. This is a loss especially for birds who live off them. In the West Havel Reserve, research is being conducted into how much artificial lighting influences biodiversity and biological processes. The insect traps are part of a large-scale scientific study in the Street Lighting Investigation Project. The findings should help to develop nature-friendly lanterns to protect the insect world.
Tonight, we caught maybe 80 individuals in one trap here, which is relatively few for July. But of course, there are also months when there are mass occurrences of mayflies. It's called mass hatching of mosquitoes and other insects. And then we have up to 5,000 individuals in one trap.
The kind of research Sophia Johannesson is carrying out here is the basis of the scientific evaluation work and is also happening in many other parts of the world. In Germany alone, there are 3 other areas, apart from the West Havel area, where insects are being collected, counted, and preserved. The samples are sent to the laboratory at the Leibniz Institute of Freshwater Ecology and Inland Fisheries in Berlin to Franz Hoeker. An entire team of experts identifies and analyzes the species here. The studies have not yet been completed, but the loss in numbers and diversity of insects is already clearly visible.
Many of the moths are protected. The garden tiger moth is a protected species, so it's always a pity to see how sensitive they are to light. But basically you realize that they are all potential pollinators of plants that are no longer available to do so in these areas.
More than half of all insects are nocturnal. Just like their diurnal relatives, they play an important role in pollinating plants. In the same way as butterflies flutter from flower to flower during the day, moths are on the move at night. But their dark habitat is often fragmented by lanterns and lit streets, making any foray into neighboring territory a risky venture. Partners for reproduction are therefore often out of reach. This fragmentation of their habitat by light pollution is another piece of the puzzle in the worldwide search for the cause of the dramatic decline in the nocturnal insect population.
And on a warm summer night, at a street light, if you just hang a passive air trap like this, there can easily be 400 insects in there. And that adds up, of course. In Germany, we have about 9 million street lighting points, multiplied by 400 on a summer night. That brings us to over 1 billion insects, which are lured out of their habitats in one night by these 9 million vacuum cleaners, to stay with the metaphor.
So the loss of insects by street lighting alone is enormous. Worldwide, it's a gigantic problem that is growing constantly. Franz Hoeker's research shows that the light pollution also affects aquatic ecosystems.
Now around 50% of the human population worldwide lives closer than 3 kilometers from a body of water. Where people live, there's water. And where people live, there's also light.
Even though some of the light reflects off the water's surface, a lot of artificial light also reaches the deeper layers of our rivers and lakes.
What you see here is a strong illumination of this shore area. Actually, there shouldn't be any light on this water surface. There's no reason to illuminate the water here. So you can see how far this area goes, and these are doses of light that are already guaranteed to affect fish.
Naturally, fish live in the dark at night. In order to investigate the effect of artificial light on fish in more detail, Franz Hölker is conducting behavioral studies at his institute.
Among the guppies, we wanted to investigate to what extent social behavior is altered, but also how much risk-taking and activity are affected by light at night. And what we saw is that in these experiments, the activity increased at night under illumination, whether it was sky glow or constant daylight. But the interesting thing was that the willingness to take risks, that is, the willingness to leave their hiding places and expose themselves to predators, increased during the day when there was lighting at night. So there was, so to speak, a spillover effect into the day.
Partly responsible for this kind of change in behavior is the hormone melatonin, which also acts in us humans when it gets dark. Franz Hölker compares the control of melatonin production in the body to the distribution of tasks in an orchestra.
And the cells in the body, they're like the musicians, as it were. And the whole program, the entire score, is written in the DNA. And what these musicians need, they're very good, but they need a conductor. This is our master clock. Around here somewhere, this is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Fish also have a master clock. Quite a lot of animals, in fact, almost all organisms have pacemaker centers, like this in their bodies. That is the conductor.
This master clock also influences melatonin production that regulates the human sleep-wake rhythm and lets us sleep at night. When the receptors on our retina pick up light, the production of melatonin is suppressed and we wake up. A complex control system in the center of our brain is responsible for this. The pineal gland only secretes melatonin again when it gets dark and little or no light reaches the eyes. This increase in the melatonin level makes us tired, lowers our appetite, body temperature, blood pressure, and more. That isn't the case only for us humans, but for almost all vertebrates. In this respect, fish have been well studied. They're particularly affected by artificial light at night. Even small amounts of light lower their melatonin level, and this affects their immune defenses, reproduction, and growth.
The typical solar spectrum during the day is dominated by blue. That's why it makes sense, for example, that vertebrates, many terrestrial vertebrates, are so sensitive to blue. With fish, it's a bit different. The bodies of water we have here, the Spree in Berlin, for example, are very muddy. That means that here the blue wavelengths are absorbed relatively quickly, while red, yellow wavelengths travel much further.
So the research group led by Franz Hölker is not only investigating the amount of light, but also what influence the colors of the light have on the underwater world. Fish, in particular, are the focus of the research. What effects do the different wavelengths of artificial light have on biological processes?
And we discovered that the melatonin production is reduced no matter what light color we offer, blue, green, red. They actually respond to all light colors.
For other creatures, and above water, the color of light usually plays a decisive role. And the more the nightly flood of lights from big cities and street lighting displaces darkness, the more far-reaching the consequences for humans and animals. Since time immemorial, the vision of nocturnal species has been adapted to the light of the stars and the moon. But human beings have changed the brightness and colors of the night, a disturbing factor that impedes the night vision of many animals. Scientists in the Dutch Veluwe forest area now want to find out how the different lights affect nature with a colorful experimental arrangement. To do this, they set up lamps in different colors, deliberately disturbing the nightly darkness. For more than 10 years, ecologist Camille Spoelstra has been observing which wavelengths have the greatest impact on the natural behavior of animals.
Place a light in an area which is normally a pristine, dark, natural environment. You place those lights there, and from the moment it's there, it starts changing populations around it.
Depending on the color of the light, the animal species are affected in different ways. White light mixes all wavelengths and is visible to a large number of animals. Red lacks the spectrum to which nocturnal animals are accustomed, so the light appears less bright to them. Green light, with its high blue content, shines brightest for nocturnal animals and has a strong impact.
What we know about the green light is that it actually shies away many nocturnal species, even more so than, for example, white light. And that has to do with the eye sensitivity of nocturnal species. They're relatively blue sensitive and relatively little red sensitive.
With modern LED technology, we can control the wavelength of lights and design them to be less harmful for wild animals.
Like bats that have a flyway, where lights that actually cross this flyway. And these lights may actually block these bats from using this flyway. Now, if you illuminate the location with a red light, then bats may continue to use this flyway. And that may be a very effective way in mitigating the impact of light.
But not every species reacts the same way. Wood mice avoid any place where there is light. Birds stay, but sleep less in white light. Every light affects the natural environment in different ways. These effects are subtle, but over a long period of time, they can affect entire ecosystems far beyond the area impinged by the light.
All these effects on species, they interact, and an effect on one species may carry over to an effect on another species, the so-called cascading effects in the ecosystem. So even if you're a species like a bird being active in the day, you may suffer from these lights because your insect prey species disappear from your environment because they need the night to forage. So yeah, many things can happen to an ecosystem, and many things will happen at different levels and will cascade through these different levels.
Back to northern Germany's future dark sky park.
It's bad. Colorful hodgepodge. Absolutely not necessary. 4,000 Kelvin. The blue peak is much higher.
To become a dark sky community, the local municipalities have to optimize their street lighting.
Way too bright. Billboard lighting. Not very efficient. It's an absolute catastrophe.
Tonight, Andreas Hähnel shows a representative of the municipality where there is still too much light shining into the night sky.
So this is the filter you can use to create a spectrum. Very good. We see that it's an LED lamp, and you can see that the blue is very strong, which is quite typical, quite characteristic for LED lighting. And if we now take a real measurement, then we also get the value directly, what the color temperature is. And now we measure here, on the ground. Right. So now we see the spectrum. We have 18 lux. It's relatively bright down here.
Half of it would be enough. Lux is a unit of measurement for illuminance. At a value of 9 lux, as Andreas Haenel recommends here, the pavement would still be around 50 times brighter than on a night with full moon. Light color is also decisive for eco-compatibility.
We see the spectrum now, and here's the blue peak, and we have the color temperature of 2,800. So that's actually how it should be.
Kelvin is the unit of measurement used to measure the general color impression of a light source. Light with a reading of over 5,000 Kelvin, for example, tends to appear cold blue. Below 3,000 Kelvin, light appears orange-yellow. We find this more agreeable. The results of Andreas Haenel's measurements show communities how they can convert their lighting.
If you want to reduce it, you have to do it on a large scale. That means you would have to convert the entire municipality at once. Otherwise, you wouldn't see it. But at the same time, we want to show that the lighting is still good in the towns. It doesn't mean that we have to turn it off completely, but that we can reduce it as needed during the night.
In some places, dimmable streetlights are already in use. But many lamps are still too bright. Effective measures are actually quite easy to implement. Lamps with very bright, cold light colors that radiate in all directions are harmful. They waste a lot of light, attract insects like a vacuum cleaner, and dazzle. Less illuminance, that is, darker light, helps. And warm light below 3,000 Kelvin has a much less harmful effect on insects and other creatures. But the most important thing is targeted illumination. If we shield lamps and direct their light only where it's needed, it interferes less with nocturnal creatures, and we're able to see the starry sky again. Because of the obvious consequences of light pollution, it's vital we act soon, even if there's more research to be done. In Fulda, Dark Sky Park coordinator Sabine Frank is working on it. Her interest in light pollution was sparked a few years ago in November, when she observed that some chestnut trees still bore leaves.
I noticed that the trees can't shed their leaves. I don't think anyone ever noticed that, but I saw it and I thought something was wrong. I always look at the trees. Always in autumn, I look where the trees are, if there is a light next to it, and if the tree can defoliate. And I have thousands of photos of trees that have problems because of light.
In Sabine Frank's pictures, it's clear that the branches closest to the lantern are still bearing leaves, even though it's almost winter. To avoid frost damage, however, the trees should have shed their leaves. Clearly, the lanterns between the trees are impacting this cycle. Studies have shown that it isn't the heat, but the light that plants are reacting to so sensitively. Normally, the intensity, duration, and availability of sunlight gives them the information they need to survive, when they need to grow, take in water, and shed their leaves. This keeps them in tune with the rhythm of the seasons. The lanterns, however, fool the branches into thinking it's a different season, and so, over the course of many years, the artificial light can lead to tremendous frost damage.
I actually took the photos and went to the city administration, to City Hall, and showed them to the city planning commissioner, the woman who's responsible for everything that gets built here. And she was like, "What?" She didn't want to believe it. She was really, "What is this? What is this?" So at first there was consternation, because these trees are important for citizens and need looking after. And the city of Fulda, to their credit, has converted all the lamps in the entire city like this.
This was the start of a complete transformation of the night in Fulda. Taking so many measures to protect the darkness, Fulda became the first official dark sky city in Germany.
Only policies can really make a difference. And last year, the politicians actually changed the law, the Nature Conservation Act, and they decided on the containment of light pollution for the entire national territory. In fact, for the whole of Germany.
It'll still be years before the law is implemented in concrete regulations. Nevertheless, the first step has been taken.
We already know what we want, how we want it. It's technically possible. And I just hope that municipalities have now understood with this change in the law that the issue of light pollution cannot be ignored any longer.
Fulda even went so far as to modify the lighting of its greatest treasure. In the past, the cathedral was lit up all night. Today, at 10 p.m. sharp, the lights go out.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. That's the best thing for me when the cathedral is switched off. Off! When the sky is clear and there's no moon, you can really see lots of stars. Really, a lot of stars.
In Fulda, too, people didn't think about light pollution at all for a long time. But now, they say,
light off, stars on. Light off, night on.
Like Fulda, dark sky cities and dark sky parks around the world are setting examples for good practices in light management, where stars may shine brightly.
The life on our planet has been exposed to sunlight at day, darkness at night. And of course we have the moon, to which species also have adapted. But the change in nocturnal illumination is just going too fast.
Scientists are gathering more and more evidence about how light influences every living thing around us. But a lot of key questions are still unsolved.
What are the threshold values? When does artificial light become light pollution, with negative effects on organisms?
And it's not only life at night that is affected by our hunger for light.
It's hard to imagine, but the effect of these lights actually extend all the way into the day. And you may wonder, how is that possible?
It's a complex problem not easily visible in everyday life. We need scientists to find the guidelines.
We know individual effects, but we often don't know the big picture context, and we've got to carry on. Research into the effect of light pollution on natural phenomena, elements, on species and habitats, there's still so much to do.
But what are the solutions, and how do we implement them in our lit-up life?
I think it's very, very important to convince people with facts.
Darkness must be given a value. That is really important, because it's the basis for social action.
So what can we do to make things better if it comes to light at night? Well, first of all, avoid it. Only illuminate places that we really want to illuminate.
For many of us, artificial light is so all-pervasive, we don't notice it anymore. But the effects we create change the natural world for half of the creatures on this earth. With new insights, techniques, and regulations, we can now have more control over how we shape the night. What might that look like? Turn off your lights and see for yourself.